So that's what we're here to talk about here tonight. We're going to talk about some of the different hazards. We've got a few slides to go through and just discuss some of the different ways that we can not only address these growing hazards and some of the safety issues that come with it, but also how we can mitigate and deal with it, not just from a wildfire standpoint, but from a community standpoint. So again, I'm Adam, the owner of Firehouse Training. Justin Brunner, you want to introduce yourself and what you're doing here with the Alliance?
Yep. Thanks for attending tonight, guys. My name's Justin. I'm the founder and CEO of Desisolve. We are a fire-based training company that generates scenarios for training for the fire services and also for EMS services.
Very good. Pete Sells, what about yourself? Tell us a bit about what you guys do. Nope, you're on mute, pal.
Can't hear you.
Oh boy. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Peter Sells. I'm one of the founders of FireRain. We are the makers of EcoGel, which is 100% bio-based fire protection hydrogel, first and only one in the world. And I'll tell you a little bit about it a little bit later on.
Beautiful, appreciate it. And Tom, why don't you talk a bit about the Fire Mitigation Alliance and how you brought all of us here together?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. I've put together this network of partners that all bring different things to the table, and we're looking for other players that can add to the mix because there's just so many things that need to get done. Adam's group does Firehouse training. He does just about every kind of training you can imagine, but I'm sure there's things that he can use help with. And the idea that we have players that are like EcoGel we just heard about, and Desisolve. There's a bunch of technology that all will work together, and I'm meeting with vendors and understanding how they fit into this ecosystem. And Amplicam is one group that is near and dear to my heart because I've been involved with it for a couple of years now. It's early detection, fire detection for mostly wildland fires, but also we're also working on near field fires within about 1 kilometer or 2. The Amplicam will pick up fire within 30 kilometers, whereas the other alternative we're talking about is for heat sources like pellets or burning vehicles that might be within a 2-3 kilometer radius of a place. So anyways, that's sort of where I'm coming from. We were down in down near Kingston and on Wolf Island last night with Adam, and we did a EV battery training, which is sort of going to be a continuation of what we're doing here today. Hopefully the people that were in that session will get something extra out of today as well. So
I appreciate it, Tom. So again, one other note for everybody. There is a public event that is happening on the 26th in Mississauga. You're all welcome to come. At Firehouse Training, we're doing a lot of electric vehicle, lithium-ion battery classes, primarily for first responders. But we're getting more and more calls and concerns from community stakeholders, insurance companies, property managers, building owners, warehouses, and other workplaces that are looking for assistance and safety training in this topic. You're all welcome to join us. That is Thursday the 26th, Tom? Wednesday.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Wednesday, actually.
Wednesday the 26th in Mississauga. And after that, we're going to do a little networking over at Jack Astor's as well. So if you are interested, do send us an email after tonight. We already have 25 tickets sold for that already, or seats taken for that. So it's going to be very busy. Again, a lot more than just first responders there. We'll be covering everything from dealing with electric vehicle, underground parking garages, to charging stations and other hazards more specific to this topic. So again, you're all welcome to attend. So hit us up for that. So we'll jump right in, everybody. What are we going to cover here tonight? We're going to talk about that intersection of wildfires and electric vehicles and some of the hazards that were migrating towards each other during the last 2 major fires that we've seen in Hawaii and LA. Even as of recently, we've seen fires in New York State that have had an effect on car dealerships, battery energy storage systems, and others. So with wildfire dynamics and understanding these risks, it's not just about the suppression tactics needed to deal with the wildfires, but how are we going to handle the electric vehicles? We saw in LA recently, the lack of water. We know that's going to be a big, big problem when you need to put the wet stuff on the red stuff. And then, of course, what is that decision-making process for the combined hazards? whether it's dealing with the wildfire themselves or your large energy storage systems and facilities, to large battery warehouses, to car dealerships, that were causing a major issue. Right now, we're seeing a huge problem with now the remnants of these burned out vehicles and the stranded energy left in these batteries that they don't know what to do with. It is single-handedly the biggest lithium-ion battery disposal mitigation project in the history of the world as we speak in LA. Again, politics aside, we know that in California, they certainly like their electric vehicles and the push for green energy. And that has been a definite contributor to the hazards and issues that we've seen. Pete from Fire Rain, I might ask you, my friend, did you have much information on what was taking place out there from a fire suppression standpoint with the wildfires? What were you hearing from a boots on the ground? You there, Pete?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're primarily, primarily following the media, but we did get some requests for information on our stuff, but not from the big agencies. These were primarily from wealthy homeowners and property owners.
Yep.
That were interested in protecting their own assets. So we got that kind of contact, and those things unfortunately take a little time to mature, and the fire doesn't wait for you. But people are starting to warm up to the idea, or become aware of the idea, that despite where you are, despite your tax base and your infrastructure, ultimately you're on your own.
I agree with you on that. And some of the things that we saw, homeowners that even had the water turned off to their own homes when utilities got shut down. So whether it was water infrastructure, hydro and others, and that actually caused a big issue with people looking to charge their electric vehicles before they were trying to flee or leave their community. So that was another reason, not just the fire hazards themselves from the electric vehicle, but they weren't able to leave their homes because they couldn't get a charge. Now, apparently, a lot of individuals in those regions have electric vehicles, and they don't have their own charging stations at home. They just rely on community chargers. And that's a big problem when you don't have something like that or your own infrastructure in your own house. When it comes to the wildfire hazards and risk management, we already know about the rapid fire spread due to wind, terrain, and others. There's the heat and smoke damage from the Class A fire that you're getting already, just from the trees, just from the wildland itself, the vegetation and others. But now when you're looking at the hazards, when it comes to dealing with a battery energy storage system, a multiple electric vehicles, don't just think of them as one or two electric vehicles at a time. We're talking about tens of thousands. Greg Scott, one of my instructors here at Firehouse, I might put you on the spot if I can, pal. What are some of those hazards that we see with that many batteries in one place at one time? What are the main hazards of a lithium-ion battery? What are we going to see from that smoke?
Well, you're going to be getting that hydrogen fluoride gas. That's one of the major things spreading with that. Then if you're getting into, contaminants and runoff from all that water. So worrying about that, and how do you contain it? How do you deal with it? And who's going to clean it up after the fact?
That's a big issue, right? So remember, with these batteries, it's a moisture-proof encased, box that is holding all these small cells. Now, in these small little battery cells, you have different metals, nickel, cobalt, manganese, iron, and others that make up the chemical composition to transfer energy from the anode and cathode back and forth throughout these batteries. Now, what happens is that liquid electrolyte inside, when it's under heated pressure, it starts to build up, and almost boil over to the point where it's not a normal fire. You're going to get that propagation. You're going to get those explosions. And that's where we see the major risk. Firefighters being around these vehicles, fighting it like a typical, ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine. And then all of a sudden it explodes. The pressure will build up in these batteries, and it is a different hazard. It's a different risk. So we just need to consider that. Not only that, if you look at some of the videos from Hawaii and even LA recently, I mean, heck, even FDNY in an urban environment, we need to start treating these vehicles as a hazmat call. It is a toxic toxic bomb. And what's happening is you're getting fire captains and firefighters walking around the scene with no masks on. I know, Greg, you and I talk about that quite a bit. Why is it so important to be on air when even within a 100-meter vicinity of these batteries with those gases? What are we seeing there?
Well, you're looking at it almost like we talked about it a couple of times before in classes. It's like being in a coal mine for years and years and years. It's so toxic. The gases are so corrosive that you take a couple breaths and you're pretty much done. It's just, having that. In my 25 years on the job, I haven't yet to see a air fill station with a credit card swipe on the side. Why not wear your gear? It's issued to you where you protect yourself and your family. We've had some discussion, on and off. Like, do you go down range on air? Absolutely. That's my opinion, but
yeah,
I'm just looking at the best interest of myself. But, now we're sending guys down with pH paper, F paper to minimize that risk. And like you said, using thermal imaging and infrared guns as well.
Yeah, Greg brings up a good point. When Greg and I are teaching battery classes together, we need to look at the different tools to quantify what we're dealing with. And that's the one thing I know for certain with some of my connections in LA, they haven't really done. Now, with that being said, right, we know that many firefighters there are not fighting those fires with air packs on. They have their N95s or other P100 type filtered masks that can only filter out so much. And that could be a conversation for another day, Greg, on what it's really filtering out when it comes to the different carcinogens and chemicals in the smoke. However, when it comes to dealing with the vehicle itself, the hydrogen fluoride, the carbon monoxide, and others, we need to be aware that it's not just the respiratory hazard; it's what's sitting on your gear, it's what's potentially getting in within your skin. So with these risks, and we're talking about one or two vehicles that maybe an urban firefighter would fight, but imagine a whole car dealership versus full of electric vehicles. You have multiple ticking time bombs of lithium-ion batteries that can not just ignite, but detonate at any time. And they're all going to burn differently based on that state of charge, right? So the risk is so much greater. And we're not even getting into the cleanup yet. So without the lack of water supply, which we knew a lot of those hydrants were dry in LA, they basically decided to leave them burn. And now this is the other thing we need to consider. When you have incidents like this, wildfire, we know we're going to have individuals evacuate in the community. We want them to leave, right? That's pretty self-explanatory when you have the wildfire impinging on the community with electric vehicles and energy storage systems. But what if you just have an electric vehicle or a battery energy storage system in an urban community with no wildfire impinging? As a company officer, do we protect in place or do we evacuate? Justin, I think you and I talked about that when we taught on the weekend together, that ability at a hazmat event. Do you always evacuate or do you protect in place? And what are some things that you kind of think about for an event such as this because of the toxic gases in the air? Do you really want people outside?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Adam. Right? Do we have people shelter in place? Right? Do we put out to the media? What do we need to do with that? And then two, what is the cost of getting people to move? Right? Are we putting them right into harm's way? Are we going to create other incidents because people are evacuating? So a lot of thought has to go into that, and you really have to put your best foot forward with it when making those decisions.
Great point. I got a question here from Brett in the chat. Greg, you can feel free to chime in with your experience too. Can we get these contaminants decon from our gear? Right now, some fire departments currently say that it is best to clean your gear twice because of those metal contaminants that might still be sitting in the gear. Based on further studies that I've read and other research, we are seeing that we're not getting our extractors hot enough to pull those deadly metals out of the gear to actually completely decontaminate them properly. What are your thoughts on that, Greg, and maybe some of the stuff you've read as well from a research perspective?
So yeah, like Adam said, all those heavy metals are being penetrated into the gear, and like the washers in our extractors and the fire halls aren't hot enough to actually withdraw that those metals. So it's doing it, cleaning it a little bit, but not to the point that it's actually beneficial to our health and safety. I know mutual friends of ours that have done research down in the States at Tex, and they're looking at using liquid CO2 to actually do the extraction of the heavy metals. So I think the paper should be out in the next little bit. I think Chris was talking about that. So But yeah, that's what they're trying to do in the States, use liquid CO2 to actually penetrate to pull those heavy metals out of the gear. So
when you see that, everybody, that effect it has on our gear, sitting on our skin, and now getting into our lungs. There's been incidents even here in Ontario where a couple firefighters have been gravely injured because they inhaled the toxic gas after a garage fire that had multiple e-bikes in it, and they'll never be the same again. So we need to be very, very smart when it comes to wearing proper PPE and then keeping that distance from these vehicles because of not just the toxic vapor risks, but even the explosions, right? The reignition chances. The reignition on these vehicles in LA and Hawaii, the hurricanes down in Florida, there are some instances that even after a vehicle is burnt out, it would catch fire 3, 6, and even 9 months later, just because there was stranded energy inside of that lithium-ion battery and just enough juice, just enough state of charge for it to reignite again once it was moved, or once it might have been impacted by salt water, other moisture, maybe the atmospheric pressure change. Like, all those things will have an effect on a battery cell if it's damaged and exposed. Greg, anything you want to talk about there, just why that reignition happens and why we're seeing such a vast amount of time happen, and then boom, it could still potentially ignite?
So just doing some more research on like certain manufacturers, they've come out with now the battery packs are actually being built a little bit less stringent, to say the least. So like, for example, the Teslas are actually building their battery packs that they are able to burn out faster. The cells are out to be able to drop quicker out of the vehicle. So that makes more of a potential hazard for us as first responders. But having those reignitions, those little cells are the same size as a AA battery. And it's just like a ticking time bomb. You don't know how the impact of it's sitting there, how long it's going to be, how much thermal runaway has been exposed to. It's just a matter of using your tools to check those and, picking them up after every scene. It's just a thing you have to do.
Lots of things to think about for sure. And again, when it comes to dealing with isolating these batteries or trying to deal with them, can we de-energize these batteries on site? I know they ask us that as firefighters. Not that I know of. I don't think there's any way to do this safely, or even from an engineering standpoint. My good friend Patrick at Stash Training even says that with these vehicles that are damaged or with that stranded energy, there's nothing we can do on scene to actually de-energize them. Now we can go ahead and cut that first responder loop to try to minimize the movement of energy within that vehicle, but it doesn't necessarily drain that energy. What are your thoughts on that when it comes to the overall battery capacity and actually draining that energy? I know, Greg, even with your hazmat background, have you heard of any way to do that?
Oh, not really. It's almost like the old mentality of, disconnect the battery and you're going to de-energize the airbags. You get airbags, depending on the manufacturer, airbags last up to 12 minutes, up to 32 minutes, depending on the manufacturer. So the same thing is going to apply to your EV vehicles. Like you said, that battery, that first responder loop, it's kind of like the brains of the vehicle. We start messing around with it, if it hasn't been damaged, is it beneficial, or is it actually going to cause us more problems in the long run? So that's the thing, as an incident commander or a captain or the officer in charge, have to make that call.
When you're looking at fire suppression, when we're looking at different ways that we can put these out, obviously it could still be up for debate. We got different things like how we're going to manage thermal runaway. They say, well, if you put water on these fires, it won't actually extinguish it. It'll just slow thermal runaway or minimize that propagation. Then there's other things, other tools out there like the TFT transformer or even Bresnan nozzles that can go underneath and potentially cool that battery, right? That's going to be another technique. The use of fire blankets and other ways to extricate these the individuals out of a vehicle that might be a little bit different than that of an internal combustion engine. Based on different ways to put these fires out, there are options out there, but depending on what the fire department has for equipment, they might not be able to necessarily do anything except for get their deck gun out, maybe a ground monitor, and put copious amounts of water on that battery to cool it. Now, it is still up for discussion when it comes to, do we want to waste that amount of water in a rural fire department setting to try to cool this battery if we know we're not going to put it out? We need thousands and thousands of liters. The average electric vehicle might burn for 2, 4, or maybe 6 hours. So it's up to you as an incident commander, officer, or emergency manager to make the decision on whether or not you can actually fight that fire adequately with the water that you have. Greg, I know you and I, sometimes we agree, other times we disagree. Based on what you've seen so far, is there any tried and true methods or recommendations that we can attempt to do when it comes to trying to suppress these fires?
I think this, if it's into the actual frame and the body of the vehicle, you can treat it like it's all depends on your scene size up. If you don't see that white gas, there's a good chance or a possibility that the compartment hasn't let go yet. So if it's just in a compartment of the vehicle, you can treat it like a regular car fire.
Okay.
Now, if you're encountering that white fire, that white smoke and gas, chances are that the battery pack has let go and it's going to get into that thermal runaway. There's other products on the market, say, to try to penetrate the battery pack, but if you're doing that, you're causing actually more damage in the long run with the building, in penetrating other different cells. So I think cooling is probably the best bet. If you have no exposures and there's nothing around, my own personal opinion, let it burn.
Yeah, no, and I agree. That comes down to decision making. Anthony Punko, how are you, my friend? I might put you on the spot here. Anthony from Emergency Decon Solutions out in Alberta. Have you heard of anything going on out in Western Canada? Any products or other things that you've seen that might have an effect on these fires themselves, or anything new on the market through your relationships?
Nothing really. Like, there's the Fire Rain, of course, and then there's another company that has Citrotech, I think they're called.
Okay.
Kind of similar, but a little bit different, but kind of looking for the same results. Yeah, in regards to cleaning of gear, liquid CO2 seems to be about the best, but you have to watch. There's different processes, so some are a little better than others, where they don't remove the contaminants, and you're better off just to wash it with a hotter water and extractor. Will take and give you better results than some of the liquid CO2, but there are some liquid CO2 cleaning systems out there that do remove about 75% of the heavy metals.
Okay, interesting. No, it's again, we're so new to this particular topic. We're going to see a lot of changes, I think, in the next little while as well. That whether it's products or other tactics and strategies. Peter, I know you're here from Fire Rain. Now we're talking a bit about some different operations and strategies, not only dealing with the electric vehicles themselves, but also the wildfire and the other hazards that cause from a greater community standpoint. We have the energy storage systems. We have our our defensible space, obviously our Class A materials, including houses and others. Peter, if you don't mind chatting a little bit about what your product can do to help combat this, and even some of the recent studies that came back that shows that Fire Rain EcoGel isn't just ideally for wildland, but also has an effect on lithium-ion battery response.
Sure. Can I share my screen a bit?
I don't think you can, my friend. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So let me start then by explaining what Fire Rain EcoGel is. It's a concentrate of vegetable oils, starches, and gums with some other ingredients in there to make it not settle and give it shelf life. And essentially, everything that's in there, if you've had a salad dressing or barbecue sauce or any kind of prepared foods in the last 2 weeks, you've eaten almost everything that's in EcoGel. That's how safe it is. So, and it was formulated specifically with that in mind. It's certified as being 100% bio-based. So that differentiates EcoGel from essentially every other fire suppression or retardant product that's out there. Having said that, what it does is when mixed with water, it forms a viscous gel. And then depending on the concentration of that mix, the consistency could be anywhere from like a salad dressing up to almost like a pancake batter, which you would vary that depending on what your application is. For a Class A fire, you're going to go thin, 1%, maybe 3%. For a car fire, you're going to go probably 3%. And for a Class B flammable liquids fire, you're going to go up to 6% and get it thicker. For wildlands, the advantage of the EcoGel is it can be applied several hours in advance of the fire, and it will essentially make the water stick. The water will stick to the vegetation, the tree tops, all the way down to the ground, and so essentially it will keep the vegetation wet as the fire front approaches. For EV fires and lithium-ion battery fires, the studies that Adam was referring to, which we don't have a final version to release yet, but the studies are showing that the EcoGel can limit or mitigate the propagation of a thermal runaway between modules and between cells of a battery pack. Keep in mind that nothing can affect what's actually going on inside the battery cell. That's just chemistry, and it makes its own oxygen and has its own little party. But what we can do is we can affect the propagation of that heat to adjacent elements. The real advantage, I believe, of EcoGel at electric vehicle fires is its ability to protect exposures, whether that be the adjacent vehicles or the structures, parking structures, or also to contain and limit runoff, both toxic and hazardous liquid runoff, but also the particulates. A fine spray of EcoGel across the area where the vehicle is venting out all these hot toxic products. Those particles and materials that are being expelled out will be taken up by the EcoGel, and now what you've got is, instead of just a runoff that is uncontrollable, you've got a viscous runoff which is manageable, and ultimately the volume is going to be smaller because you're going to use less water. So all of that, the wildfire, the structure and vehicle fires themselves, and the EV and lithium-ion battery aspects of it, we can be of advantage to you.
No, I like that, and keep in mind, if anyone is familiar with FireRain, I just put their website in the chat. Definitely check it out. Various fire departments in Ontario have used it already, both for Class A and Class B fires, directly on their apparatus. It almost looks like Slimer off of Ghostbusters. When it comes out, it has that viscous look. So as it's pressurized through the water stream, and then once it makes contact with the object that it is being deployed on, you can almost see that thickness that helps with the rekindle. Again, whether it's wildfire and the fact that it's environmentally friendly, and now that we can have the advantage of using it on lithium-ion batteries, especially when it comes to the cooling or the rekindling, there are options there. Did you chat a bit about how they're being deployed from the boxes out of those airplanes yet, Pete?
I didn't. That was why I wanted to share my screen.
Yeah. Just kind of give a quick description of that before we move on, and just how your product comes out of these boxes and how it's deployed over top of these fires.
Okay, I will do that. But I see that Anthony had a question. Anthony, it was not Fort McMurray. It was Jasper this past year. And what we did was we're we're being used by the contractors that are protecting the railway infrastructure in Alberta and BC. And so essentially the bridges, which some of these bridges are over a century old and made of wood. And there's hundreds and hundreds of bridges all throughout both provinces. And they basically spray them with now EcoGel. And they were able to keep uninterrupted rail service going through Jasper. So that was, I think, what you might be referring to. What Adam just asked me about is a company called Caylym, CAYLYM. And I put my email address in the chat. If you want more information, I can get it to you there. But Caylym manufactures essentially a cubic meter cardboard box that is then filled with whatever extinguishing agent, be it water or hopefully EcoGel. And so now what you've got is you've got 1,000 liters of extinguishing agent in a box. All right, so what does that do for you? What that does for you is you now load those boxes into any rear drop cargo plane, like a C-130 or equivalent plane, and instead of using a tanker, a water tanker, you take that military cargo plane up and drop as many as 16 tons of these boxes in one drop. The advantages are they can drop from higher altitude and still have a very accurate drop because it's contained in the box until the box disintegrates. Essentially, the box is designed to fall apart, as it drops, and they can also then do 24-hour operations because they're not flying along the terrain. They can drop from higher altitudes. The strategic implication is that there are a lot more cargo aircraft available than there are firefighting aircraft.
Interesting. That makes sense then, yeah.
And we're looking, well beyond North America on this. We're selling into countries that don't have firefighting aircraft or only have a couple. Or there's situations that come up like in Central Europe and Eastern Europe right now. Their firefighting aircraft were coming from Russia. But right now, nobody's playing in the sandbox over there. So this company, Caylym, has been selling into Europe for over 10 years. Italy, Romania, and some of these are fairly big countries with developed countries with a lot of forest. Certainly not the size of Canada and the United States, but on their scale, the problems are equivalent. And this is a really good option. And then it's even better if they're dropping the EcoGel, and essentially it becomes a force multiplier. You get about a factor of 5 in terms of the effectiveness of what you're dropping.
If I can ask your experience as we kind of get back to understanding the strategies and tactics behind the wildfires, the batteries, and everything that's at play, especially with your time previously in a management or chief's role, what do you see from the operational planning standpoint when working with the municipalities or the agencies with your product, without your product? Overall, do you see a lot of moving parts when it comes to dealing with these large scale wildfire events and all the individuals that you need to have, play nice in the sandbox to either purchase your product or even incorporate it into their strategies when fighting these fires?
Well, I think the main issue is that the technologies that are being used are the same technologies that have been used for 20, 30 years.
Right.
And they're kind of locked in. I'll give you an example. In order for any kind of fire suppression or retardant product to be dropped out of an airplane, it's got to be placed on the U.S. Forest Service Qualified Products List, QPL. If you look at the qualifications to get on that Qualified Products List, nothing is mentioned in there about the actual efficacy of the product. What is mentioned in there is compatibility with the aircraft fleet. Okay, so it's very difficult for for a new product, particularly a new product that's using a different strategy or a different technology, right, to actually do the extinguishment. Very difficult to crack that nut. So it's essentially a kind of it. I mean, I don't want to paper all these guys with paint them all with one brush. The logistics of fighting wildfires, when you think about everything from municipal fire departments up to upper tier governments, provincial and federal agencies, and then international cooperation between all those agencies.
Yeah.
And don't think just about Canada and U.S. Canada, U.S., Australia, South Africa, Chile. Right? There's a lot of moving parts, and that's been what we've experienced. It's difficult to get the attention of the right people, particularly when they're working 16-hour days putting out fires.
And we've seen that already. There's been criticism, it's for the mayors and the fire chiefs in LA and other communities from a public safety perspective, resource perspective, dealing with staffing to equipment to even having water for these fires. Tom, if I could put you on the spot, I know you call out on behalf of Firehouse and Amplicam when dealing with different municipalities, Ministry of Natural Resources and others. Can you speak to the complex systems that you see and the different agencies that are all involved, not just in the equipment sourcing and management with what you're in, but also on how to fight these fires and the different agencies that are involved?
Probably not the best person to answer that, but I'm actually thinking with Peter, when we talked, showed that I was listening last night when we were in Kingston, but the idea that the battery fires and using your system, your gel was using it on things that were close to it, so including spraying trees and bushes and shrubbery because the flammability of this. Of a battery fire, you don't want it to turn into a wildland fire,
right?
Or the house being approached, engulfed next door to it, or another car beside it, sort of thing. And that's where your strategy of coating everything around it, so that there couldn't be this whatever the term for it is, a knock-on process.
Yeah, again, there's a lot of play here in implementing that incident command system and ensuring that you have the resources available, whether it's the wildland planes, the equipment. It's no different than fighting an industrial fire. Do you have enough foam that you're going to do or use to deal with these events? There's major issues. Anthony, yourself, with your background in the procurement industry, do you see a lot of times when there's natural disasters or large events that a lot of these departments or agencies didn't have the equipment they needed to begin with, and they're kind of playing catch up, or sometimes they might be, maybe just not have proper staffing or an equipment cache to deal with it? What have you seen in your experience?
For sure, in 2016, when the big fire went through, it kind of like we had some resources here that might have helped. I think they were deployed too late.
Okay.
And then we're just playing catch up. But in regards to getting equipment in and out, the majority of aircraft was trying to get people out of the area. So once they were gone, then it kind of switched over into getting equipment in. And by then they kind of had an idea of what they needed for equipment, whether it's hoses or pumps or whatever it was. Now we had a lot of the sites have big mobile heavy equipment, dozers, stuff like that. So they're able to transport them out to the front lines and help there. And then in this past year, we had the fire come close again, burning in kind of the same spot, encroaching on the city. But this time, they were a little more proactive, so they had us out there a little earlier.
Yep.
They got some of the bigger equipment up here with the big water supplies and the big sprinkler systems. Starting to use helicopters with night vision,
Yep.
stuff like that. So it's definitely a big difference between the two. We've come quite a ways. I still think that there's some work that needs to be done in regards to your interagencies. So your forestry and municipal and even provincial in regards to utilizing each other's resources and expertise, because there was sometimes this past year where we were, like, when I say we, the municipality or the industrial sites were willing to help, but the wildfire was like forestry was a little slow in getting us mobilized and used. And some of that, from what I heard, was due to some of the contracts that they had with some of the companies. So don't really know why some of that went on, but it was definitely a big change from 2016 to this year in regards to helping each other out a lot more and stuff like that. So.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. Tom and I, on our travels back last night from Wolf Island, we were discussing, the incident command, the emergency management side, and that's actually going to be the topic we do on our next free webinar in a couple of months, or what we might do in Mississauga this summer, because we see that gap in communication between multiple agencies, the strategies and tactics that take place, and not really understanding what each agency's resources and capabilities are. Whether it's a foam cache, whether it's certain equipment, whether it's staffing or a particular piece of apparatus. Answering Deputy Chief Olmsted's question here in the chat, he was talking about accessing foam. It's funny you mentioned that. Oh, Pete put in his email there. The pros and cons of foam we can definitely go through on another night. But when it comes to the cache of equipment such as foam, when John Kasulis, who's on the chat here tonight, and I were in an industrial complex tour a few months ago, we realized even for the large amount of industrial chemicals and oils and other products that were there within those floating dome tanks, they didn't even have enough foam on site at an industrial facility in the city to deal with. So the question I asked was, where's the rest of your foam cache? Oh, that's at the other Imperial Oil site or the other, site that they have 2 towns away, sitting on a front end loader or sitting on a tractor trailer. So by the time you go and access that foam, whether it be in the next town or the next county, that's going to be a problem, right? And whether it comes to foam or other products out there like the Eco Gel, you typically don't want to start using those resources unless you have enough to finish the job. We see that in an urban setting. It's an issue.
Yeah, and there's a lot of industrial sites that I know of where they don't have the amount of foam that they need.
Exactly.
Their emergency plan is that if something happens, that they're looking at nearby facilities that has foam, or they're calling in like the fire boss and stuff like that to come in and bring a bunch of foam and pumps and stuff to help put out a tank fire.
No, it's an issue, and whether that foam cache is on site, a lot of times if you have to wait for it, it's not going to be a good day. So it's about managing the resources. Is there funding for that? Your command structure. You look at things like heavy urban search and rescue teams. How often are they really utilized? Our tier 1 hazardous materials response teams, Ottawa, Toronto, Windsor, are a lot of these teams being utilized to their capability? That's still up for debate. But there is resources available. It's just knowing the best way to deploy them.
Adam, if you don't mind me just kind of chiming in here.
Yeah, Johnny, please.
So With all the talk of obviously the all the products, which is, fantastic and everything else, and the EV stuff and whatnot, the biggest thing that I'm kind of taking away from this, for one, is cost for some of the products, and not all obviously all
Sure.
departments are going to be on board with doing this. Again, I can only speak for Canada,
Yeah.
but especially these days in the winter time and even in the summertime with distracted driving and everything else. Um, there's a lot of inexperienced truck drivers, especially with 18 wheelers,
Yeah.
that are going across Canada with a lot of heavily wooded areas. That when Adam and I actually went to, oh God, it was a trucking company that I think started in California. We did a tour with them
The hydrogen
here.
company.
Yeah, I think not. No, it wasn't hydrogen. It was lithium ion.
Okay.
But they were anyway. Besides the point, they were an EV trucking company started in, I believe it was California. They're starting to bring their trucks here.
Oh, right.
If this starts to implement more and more with these EV trucks and EV products of these vehicles, and with these inexperienced drivers getting into accidents, you see tractor trailers flipping over on the road on the
True.
400 series highway and going cross country every day. If you get some little no-name department that is now responding to this call, and yes, I know the same thing can happen with fuel and with diesel and whatnot, but diesel has a different flashpoint
Yeah.
or ignition point than obviously the lithium-ion batteries do, let's say, in wrecks with these big trucks. Now, if you have for example, a truck with this lithium-ion battery on board and it's a huge capsule, as well as now maybe they're hauling food or hauling something with another lithium-ion battery along their trailer. And now this inexperienced driver that they've hired has now flipped over this truck and is now in a ditch, or it's, across a sprawling piece of land, which
Hmm.
has now caught fire of this piece of land. Now we have a major issue with containing this area,
Yeah.
as well as containing the not only just the vehicle, but again, that wooded area itself. So I'm not
Yeah. It's a good point.
necessarily questioning anything. I'm just saying that this is going to continue to be a real problem. And as good as some of these products may be, it may not be enough.
Yeah, just due to the sheer size, for sure. And
Right. And it's happening too often. That's the thing that I'm noticing every other day in the news, at least I can talk for in Canada,
yeah.
is, we're seeing inexperienced truck drivers, distracted truck driving, with bigger and bigger vehicles that are going to be coming into play, even trailered EV vehicles as well that are going to be, a large volume all at once coming together, like let's say on a transport truck or anything like that. All it takes is for one ignition point to happen with one battery cell leaking to have this reaction, and then all hell is going to break loose.
And usually, Johnny, it's in a rural fire department area where it's the middle of the day and they only got 5 or 6 volunteers at one time for that entire fire. Like it's one
Well,
thing
and
after another.
and that's what I'm saying. So you get places like, for example, and again, I'm just because I haven't been cross country, but you get places like up near Temiskaming or
Mhm.
Cochrane, Ontario, further north, Thunder Bay, whatever. And you get the long sprawling highways, heavily wooded areas, lots of wildlife, lots of wooded areas, not a lot of help.
None. You're right.
What's going to happen then? And more of these trucks that are going to continue to come on the road. What is this government doing, or
Mhm.
what is the U.S. and Canadian governments doing to combat this? But they're not, because they're bringing more EV vehicles in here, and yet there's going to continue to be issues. There's going to continue to be issues. So
I did hear through
that's
the
just kind of my
grapevine.
my take on it because we're on this topic.
That's a good point. I think you're going to see a lot more electric vehicles and other things coming across, into our country as soon as we become apparently the 51st state. So I don't know if everybody heard that, but I'm kidding. Sorry, I just had to throw that out there. But again, you're seeing the batteries coming across, right? And all joking aside, where are these batteries coming from? They're coming from China. They're coming from overseas. They're a less quality battery. You're talking about e-mobility devices and scooters. Not all lithium-ion batteries, even in these vehicles, are being made in North America. So we're seeing a gap in that quality. And again, whether it's an inexperienced driver running up and down the highways, that's a big concern. And I've seen this as well as you guys have. There's a lack of even safety awareness in those industries about what they're hauling or what is even in the vehicle. A friend of mine, he works at an auto shop, and even as an automotive technician, they've been given next to no training on dealing with lithium-ion batteries. We had an electrician in our class last night in Wolf Island, and he installs those Tesla power packs in garages, and he couldn't tell me anything about some of the risks or the safety hazards. It was very, very rudimentary the way he described it. Remember that, Tom? We had that one in there, and I thought he would give me more. Just like I call out a few of my friends here on the chat here today to give me some feedback. He didn't give me anything, and he was an electrician. And that's kind of concerning. I bet you were kind of shaking your head too. He couldn't tell us one thing about that Tesla power pack, could he, Tom?
I just install it, he said.
It's exactly what he said. And ladies and gentlemen on the group here tonight, he couldn't give us anything other than that. He would shut off the power, install it, turn the power back on, make sure that it was hooked up properly, and leave. So, there is some concern. So, Justin, I might put you on the spot. Can you just tell everybody here in the group what you've been helping us do at Firehouse the last little while to help enhance our training classes with your scenarios? And I'm just going to give a quick scenario to the group, and we'll work through that when it comes to an EV fire.
Yeah, and I got my handy little, well, it's a little blurred out. Made sure I had this with me. Actually, I was looking up that HF gas. I was a little surprised on the distances there. But yeah, we've been working with Firehouse now for a while to enhance things when it comes to scenario-based training, right? And training firefighters and getting everybody ready. And the goal of what we do is we want to put training officers back in front of people, right? Instead of them spending their time sitting on computers, we want them doing what they do best, and that's training people. So we take care of a lot of that paperwork and the stuff in the background for developing scenarios for various departments, right? We built an interface that's simplified, that you put in a couple inputs, number of people that you would have respond to the call, the equipment that you have available to you, the training that you want to run. Is it pump ops? Is it an EV vehicle? Is it a BEST site? We looking at hazmat. What are these things? And then also some things that you want to throw in that might be local to your area, to your environment. And then our system takes over from there and drafts up a scenario for you that's ready to run within minutes. So we're really cutting back that time. And we had a chance over the weekend, taught with Adam there. And live in class, we had some time. We could run another scenario. So we threw one together in class, taking the inputs right from the firefighters that were there to develop what did we do? It was a diesel truck on fire between a church and a school.
Yeah, but then the students kept giving you a whole bunch of different inputs there and overcomplicated. Things got a little bit crazy. I think by the end of it, there was an atomic bomb that went off in the area. It got a little ridiculous, but we had some fun.
Yeah, I think at one point it was on fire rolling down towards the river. So,
oh my goodness. So what we're going to do here, everybody, I got a little scenario. I'll just read it off. I know, Greg, you've done this with me before, and Justin, and all I want to do is talk as a group. And again, for those that might have even a limited scope in dealing with electric vehicles or lithium-ion battery fires, it's all about talking points. You're not going to use every one of these tactics and strategies at every call, but these are things you need to consider, whether you have 5 volunteers on site or 40 firefighters on scene like we do in every call in Toronto. So here's how it's going to go. It's the dim light of an early morning at 1:15. Fire Station 1 receives a call reporting a fire involving an electric vehicle at Walmart located at 123 Main Street. It's a bustling urban parking lot with a nearby forest and wildland, surrounded by 3 retail buildings and a dim street lamp causing flickering shadows. The rain is lightly falling. With the limited space and proximity to shoppers that could further endanger the area, demanding swift planning and execution based on your training, how would you handle that lithium-ion battery or electric vehicle fire that is outside of a retail shopping mall, Walmart, but is also right on the cusp of a large wildland area as well? So I'll start things off. When we arrive on scene, we know we want to set up that isolation distance based on the most toxic part of that vehicle, which is those vapors. So if you look in the ERG, typically for an HF gas or a deadly vapor, you're around 100 meters. So that's one thing I would consider. Greg, it might put you on the spot. What are some things that you think about when you first roll up to, an EV after we set up that isolation distance? Anything from a scene size up that you'd want to consider or talk about?
Exposures, for
Big
one
time.
thing. Especially if you say you're in a parking lot, 1:15 in the morning, it could be very limited, but there's still people do park in Walmart parking lots, this camp overnight. So you got to worry about exposures and people possibly in the vehicle sleeping. Then you got to consider yourself about runoff as well. Any sort of drainage in the area environment, things like you said. There's a wall, wooded lot,
Yep.
things like that. So getting in hold of a contractor or a tow truck guy operator and pulling that vehicle away as furthest into the center of the parking lot.
Yeah, you want to try to get it away from exposures for sure. And a lot of firefighters don't consider this, but whether it's getting a chain or something and trying to pull it away from exposures, that is a number one priority for fire response. And I know we tend to not want to touch the vehicle or move it, but remember, if there's a small fire or it is smoking with that white HF gas, we need to do what we can to keep it away from other objects because we know it may continue to burn for 2, 4, or maybe 6 hours. Deputy Olmsted just said in the chat, let's try and chalk the wheels and clear the area. Another recommendation for chalking the wheels, and he is right to a certain extent, is that if it's away from exposures, we want to consider chalking the wheels because the amount of torque in these vehicles when it is under power is quite great. So whether you chalk the wheels, the days of using a 2x4, you don't want to do that. If it's a 4x4 or even a step chalk from your apparatus, the amount of torque that's in these vehicles might even be that of a V8 Challenger. Don't you think there, Johnny?
Yeah, absolutely. Go V8 by Hemi. But
you know what I mean about the torque, right, John? In comparison to the
Yeah.
car that you got sitting in your garage right now,
Yeah.
compared to how quick the ignition is and how quick that pep is and torque in those EVs.
Yeah, it can be immediate, absolutely. I was just going to ask actually, Adam, anyway.
Yeah.
Where in relation is this car to the store versus to the wooded area?
It's a good point. We know that we need to try to get it away from anything that could potentially cause further ignition, and whether it's close to the woods, close to the store itself. Even though it's on fire, a lot of people think, so you're going to try to pull this vehicle away when it's on fire. Not necessarily. You're going to suppress it to the point where you can get in at a safe distance. Yes, it might be smoking. Yes, there might be, continuing, grounding of the battery inside if you do move it. But remember, at the end of the day, as volunteer career firefighters, there's an element of risk to this job. What are we wearing that's going to protect ourselves? SCBA or bunker gear. We can't just leave it there. Even as we get to the end of this presentation in a bit, we talk about the post-fire response. As a fire investigator, we don't want to leave it there. Greg, what's one of the reasons why we don't want to leave that vehicle there, even if we did get it extinguished or what we thought was extinguished? What are some of the risks there?
You got rekindling for one.
It's huge.
Those things can reburn for up to 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the design. But again, what's it going to do to the property? There's asphalt.
Good point.
Like John said, how in close in proximity to the building, other exposures, vehicles, tractor trailers, things like that. And it's just a matter of how do we deal with it? How do we contain it? How do we get it out of that area to make it safe for everything around it?
So, you were talking last night about dragging it versus lifting it, sort of thing. Lifting it could take an extra time and effort, whereas almost dragging it was to get it out of a space.
You got to do what you kind of got to do. It might be a little bit, redneck per se, but you got to get a chain or come along, and you have to take action. A couple good questions here in the chat. So Sven said, use your thermal imaging camera for situational awareness. Greg, when you helped me teach down near London a while ago, you said it best. What are the pros and cons of using a thermal imaging camera versus a heat gun when trying to do that initial assessment? Let's say it's not on fire yet, but you're seeing white smoke or heat. What was the best way to describe kind of the use of both of those tools?
So with that thermal imaging camera, the camera is going to give you the overall heat signature. Now the cameras are getting better and better designed. They're actually going to show you a rapid change in temperature. But with the overall heat signature, you can pinpoint there. Now using those temperature guns, you can kind of isolate, the front of the vehicle is 200 degrees. The middle of the vehicle is 300-400 degrees. The rear of the vehicle is 500-600 degrees. Now I'm going to focus my water application near the back of the vehicle to start cooling the packs. So using those two tools in conjunction to be, I can see the overall heat signature, but now I can specifically pick the spot I'm going to, apply my water to be cooling output. So having that thermal, we used to use them in the military for hot breaks on our aircraft.
Okay.
We would use it. That's what we use them for, our temperature guns.
Yeah.
Our thermal imaging would give us the breaks for hot, but now we can isolate and say, okay, yeah, this section of the break's 400 or 500 degrees, as opposed to, yeah, it's hot. So.
No, another good option there. Brett Warner said, if the EV is plugged into a charger, do we need to stop the power? So again, that might not be plugged in at that point. But one other tool I recommend, not necessarily when it's on fire, but if it's smoking and you can get close to it, is the use of an EV safety plug. So this EV emergency plug will help manage some of that stranded energy and manage the battery energy from the high voltage line throughout that vehicle, to more or less keep it from moving and keeping the vehicle from physically moving. Is it going to de-energize or stop all battery power within that vehicle? No, it just keeps it at bay so the vehicle doesn't move. Now, there is a lot of safety devices in these vehicles, such as your first responder loop and other ground capacitors and other high voltage capacitors that will help manage that energy so you don't physically get shocked. A lot of people think, oh, it's an electric vehicle, it's going to shock you. There's so many safety devices in here that even if the vehicle's malfunctioning, you won't necessarily get that electric shock, but there still is that risk from the electrochemical energy we talked about, the batteries heating up, the liquid lithium inside exploding and causing additional propagation. So, you know, it's just about being aware of those hazards and taking the proper precautions. Water runoff's a big one. Now, remember, based on the pH level that you get by testing it, and Greg and I talk about this in our classes, you know, not all EV batteries or fires are created equal. The state of charge, where the battery is manufactured, the certain chemical composition, how much manganese, cobalt, liquid lithium electrolyte to nickel is in that anode and cathode, all that makes a difference. So we can't just say that every single battery fire is going to be hazardous to the public when we throw water on it, but we can test it. Greg brought up a few points earlier. If you have fluorine paper or pH paper, that will tell us whether it's acidic, basic, or neutral. And then we can decide, and every fire is different, to utilize our staff to dike and dam or create retention ponds to manage all of that water that we're putting on it. If you only have 5 volunteer firefighters during a day shift and a weekday to fight that Tesla fire on the side of the road, water runoff should not be your concern, but I would still make note of it, that it is a consideration.
Adam, going back to that plugged-in EV,
yeah,
most of them have fail switches or fail safe.
Oh, good point. Yes.
Communication between the vehicle and the charging station. If there's any sort of break in communication or something drops, the charging station automatically shuts down. So it stops power going to the vehicle.
No, you're right. Anthony, good question. The parking garages. So that's actually going to be my presentation in 2 weeks when we get together with everyone here again from the Alliance for our free networking night in Mississauga. I have a presentation I did for a property manager on underground parking garage, electric chargers, and vehicles. And I got a few nuggets in there when it comes to some of the studies. So, for example, the amount of heat that's going to come off those batteries, if you're in the P1 level and a charger's on fire and the vehicle's on fire, it will eventually, spall and degrade that concrete. And when you add a bit of water to it, when cooling it in those areas, we've seen situations overseas where we have had parking garages crumble. Now, it takes a while, and you do need a lot of vehicles to be on fire to do that. But these are all considerations structurally when you're fighting an electric vehicle in an underground parking garage, whether it's the P1, P2, or P3 level, multiple cars, multiple charging stations, it's a friggin' issue. So, for example, in Kentucky, and when we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks, it is mandatory within their state that you have to have a fire blanket beside each charging station or within that area, not for bystanders, right? We know the hydrofluoric gas is pretty bad for you, so we wouldn't recommend you fighting the fire yourself without an air pack on, but for the local fire department. Kind of like when you have a fire safety plan at a high rise or even a standpipe. So they're making decisions like that within the municipalities to combat those fires in underground parking garages and electric vehicle charging stations, even on the exterior. See, everyone, whether it's a garage with a Tesla power pack, whether it's a charging station in the middle of a parking lot or underground, the science and chemistry behind the batteries is still the same. You're still going to see lithium-ion batteries within your charging station and the infrastructure, as well as the vehicles themselves. So we need to treat them the same. So one other thing I want to bring up is there's an app that helps you with that. And I think, yeah, you got a chance to play with this too, Greg. The EV Rescue app. You can download it. It's free, and it will tell you about the different high voltage areas, in particular EVs, your cut points, your first responder loop. If you're going to use lifting bags for auto extrication, it is right here on this app, but it also has a part of the app that gives you an idea on what to do if you come across an electric vehicle charger that's on fire. Greg, have you had a chance to play with that a little bit when we talked together and kind of see some of the features on what it would show you on a vehicle when it comes to the hazards?
Yeah, we actually did that down in London. We were talking about it, and they just uploaded the Cybertruck onto it. We were talking about it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, but I used it when I was actually up getting my car repaired in really a Kia, and looked it up with the Kia Niro, and it's all there. So I went through the car in the shop, and you just follow the app right away.
No, you're right. Tyler, good question here. How do Tesla chargers react in a structure fire? Do they have a lithium storage cell? They do. Now, remember, they will short out and they will cause a fire. Even if you shut down your main power switch to the power pack wall, it still doesn't eliminate the hazard, because those batteries in there, once they're propagated by heat or flame, they're still going to do what they do. They're going to go into thermal runaway. They're going to continue to catch fire and explode until there's no more stranded energy left in those batteries, whether that switch is on or off. The batteries are still inside. So just like in Toronto, if we have a subway call and we shut down, that third rail, that high energy source, we're still going to treat it as live. We need to be very, very cautious of what we're dealing with. So some of the other things here that I have on Justin's scenario: establishing that backup or RIT team, using large diameter hose lines like 2.5-inch hoses, smoothbore nozzles for water volume to extinguish the fire, and fog nozzles to deal with the dangerous vapors. Managing the water runoff, like Greg said, deciding whether or not to cut that first responder loop. Again, many different decisions when it comes to that. Local air monitoring of the area, not just for first responders, but also for bystanders. One other thing that I want to mention here is at Firehouse, we're getting a lot of calls lately from law enforcement. We're working with a lot of police. So whether it's Six Nations Police, Hamilton, we've been to Quebec to do some training there too. They're very adamant that they want their police officers to have something safe to wear on their face for respiratory equipment. Now, Greg, you and I had those discussions before too. What are your thoughts on the N95, the P100 mask for the HF gas versus the smoke that's coming from these batteries? Are you still of the opinion that it is SCBA all the way, or maintain a safe distance away from the smoke based on what we know about these stupid batteries?
My personal opinion, I'd be going SCBA. Yeah. The N95s and the P100 cartridges, they're meant for a non-IDLH environment. So if going up to that vehicle with a respirator, I wouldn't recommend it personally.
You're right.
I would be using my SCBA because it's being self-contained and stuff.
Adam Guerin joined us. He asked an interesting question. I'm not going to get into it tonight because there's some politics involved. Have you heard any details of the recent EV school bus fire in Huntsville? I think, is Aaron still here? Not that I really want to put him on the spot. Okay, so Aaron, who works for us at Firehouse, he's actually a volunteer firefighter there, so I don't think he can comment. But right now, I do recommend that you check out my buddy Patrick Durham's YouTube page, Stash Training. He kind of pulled up the curtains on what happened with that event. And he may or may not be in talks with his lawyer about what videos he should or shouldn't take down right now because of some of the information that he found out about the EV fire there, the school bus fire. That was Lion Bus Line. And there were some incidents that happened not just in Huntsville, but in Quebec and in the US with additional fires. So that company and their current school bus lines are under investigation because of unsafe practices with their batteries and their maintenance schedule. So I'll leave it at that. Check out his YouTube page because he goes into a bit more detail. But these are serious risks, right? At the end of the day, whether it's a school bus, an electric vehicle, you see here on the slide talking about the fires in California, Australian bushfires, the hurricanes in Florida really brought this to light. We saw vehicles catching fire 9 months later because they were getting subjected to all the salt water and the heat and the atmospheric pressures that came from that climate. Do you remember that, Greg, when we first started hearing that about a year ago? These vehicles that were in tow yards or even left after the hurricanes were still catching fire many, many months later.
Battery packs are starting to corrode from the salt water,
That's
right?
right.
And then, the battery packs are corroding, all the terminals are starting to corrode. So it's just a matter of time before these things let go and then start into thermal runaway.
Lots of considerations there. I think there was a question there for you, Greg, about the tech and the deconning of the gear.
I just answered the for the tech. I see as Sven, he asked about having a survey mode. Yeah, it's great if they have it. It's an option if your thermal imaging camera comes with it. Some local fire services, the volunteers just don't have the budget. The thermal imaging or the temperature gun is a cheap option for them. You can pick it up at Canadian Tire in your local hardware store for like $20. So it's just another option for cost savings for smaller departments.
Yeah, Adam, I can chime in on that one.
Hey,
Nerd
Justin,
out on
yep.
the tick a little bit. Yeah, survey mode, that would be a great option for that, knowing that you get those lower temperatures. But the one thing you want to watch with your camera is definitely the hertz. So if you're looking at something, the lower end of the spectrum at, I don't even know what they go down to anymore, like 9 or 10. So you're looking at a refresh rate of like every 9 seconds. So if that battery's moving and it's heating up, you're waiting 9 seconds at a time to see those temperature changes. So you want to watch, really get used to that thermal imaging camera and what its capabilities are if you're going to use it for something like that.
Well, that's just it. I mean, when you look at these different tools, every department has something different. So whether it's your thermal imaging camera, even your air monitoring to test for the atmosphere, some departments with hazmat teams have papers, fluorine paper, pH paper, PID, photoionization detector. You will get some resemblance of different smoke particles within our PID. Not everything, right? Depending on the lamp size and the type of equipment you have. But you need to use what you have to try to quantify what you're dealing with, right? We can't just make these blatant statements. We're going to let it burn. We're going to take this vehicle. We're going to push it off into the lake or put it into a big, pool of water. We know that there's some tactics out there that present that. But remember, the question you want to ask yourself, everybody, is do you want to own the hazmat? Great. You've contained all the water runoff. Cool. You took that vehicle and you put it inside of, a big dumpster of water. Now you own that. You own the contaminated water. Do you have a vac truck on site? Do you have a local contract with a disposal company to take these batteries, right? So there is some risks there that you need to think about. The battery blankets, are they reusable, right? I got one here. This is more for commercial properties or high rises. Once they're exposed, can you get them clean enough based on what we learned tonight with the different metals and hydrofluoric gas to reuse them and use them again, like some of these companies claim, right? So when you're looking at different equipment and tools, you have to choose what's right for you. Your SCBA that you're wearing, are you making sure that you're properly deconning them after and doing exposure reports? I know we're pretty diligent on ensuring, post-fire decon, scrubbing each other down with some soap and water and then making sure that you're taking your gear off on scene into a garbage bag and wearing your station boots, back to the hall. There's a good one, Anthony, your personal decon options, shower as soon as you can. Anything you want to talk about that, Anthony, with some of the products you're seeing now that we know these batteries are leaving the residue on our skin and our gear? Is there anything new that you see coming down the pipe that you have through emergency decon solutions?
There's always the different wipes for firefighters that'll help decon. Now, I don't think there's been a lot of studies in regards to the contaminants from EV battery fires. So I'll have to look into that a little bit more to see if there's something better out there. But just don't forget, I guess, the clothes that you wore underneath your bunker gear, they may be contaminated, especially around the interface zone. So the cuffs, the neck area, that kind of stuff. And to be able to take and wash those appropriately. So with bunker gear, we're kind of limited in the temperature of the water, but with our with our gear that's underneath, we can take and run that up a little warmer. But then use a good solution as well too. Most of the regular laundry detergents that you get out there might not be suffice in getting rid of those contaminants.
That's a good point. No, very good. And again, when you're looking at that overall fire behavior, other things that we need to consider for hazards, the personal decon, the wipes, anything is better than doing nothing. And the importance of showering when you get back is critical. I mean, we're up to over between 15 and 20 legislated cancers here in Ontario. There is an element of risk to this job as a firefighter, but we need to do our due diligence. The fires that we're seeing now are burning differently, whether it's a wildfire, Class A, Class B, in an industrial fire or a house. Now you're looking at electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries. It's a whole new ball game. When it comes to our upcoming, problem-solving workshop, we're gonna discuss different things in our event in Mississauga, and then even in future events here with the Fire Mitigation Alliance, talking about developing incident action plans. What are the roles and responsibilities, not just for first responders? We have people here tonight that are here from the insurance companies, that are stakeholders with property management companies, healthcare professionals, law enforcement, that all deal with this, maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but it could be on a weekly or even annual basis. Remember, these are low volume, high acuity calls, which means they might not happen all the time, but we need to ensure that we have some type of plan to deal with it. So do keep that in mind when it comes to this shared learning and collaboration between all of us here. You're all welcome to join us at that event in Mississauga. So that is just to give everyone a heads up. It's called the Leading the Charge Lithium-Ion Battery Safety Night. It's a cross-industry networking event. So it goes from 6 to 8:30. It's on Kennedy Road in Mississauga. It is free. Tom said he's going to buy the first round of beers there when we go over to Jack Astor's across the street. Throwing you on the spot there, Tom. But again, I hope that you can all make it, because we're going to have a lot of individuals there outside of first responders. We do have a couple fire chiefs coming. We will have some individuals from some First Nations communities joining us too. So really excited to see a lot of you in person to network and learn more about this. So the content I'll be sharing that night, I'm going to put that in subsequent emails. Probably talk about electric vehicles and charging stations. That's a big one. We're going to talk about battery containment a little bit too, whether it's the cell block or even products here like our cooler box that you can put in this Kevlar-based cooler containment system on how we actually deal with these batteries. And then get into a little bit more detail on the recycling side. That's a whole conversation for another day. Definitely some information there based on some of the regulation here from a transportation of dangerous goods perspective that we'll cover that night too. So again, if you're interested in learning more, please join us. Again, for tonight's takeaways, just understand that we have different technology available. We have different suppression tactics, but the interagency coordination between the communities, the fire chiefs, emergency managers, the equipment companies, to get the staffing and even the training we need to handle these events is going to be ongoing. It's going to be constantly monitored, and whether we see these events unveil themselves on the news, a lot of times it does open up fire departments to criticizing. And whether it's a railway spill to tractor trailer rollover or large events like wildfires or hurricanes, it really does expose the capabilities of the emergency services. So kudos to you all for coming here tonight and joining us and just trying to learn a little bit more about these subjects. The content that we covered here tonight, I would say 90% of fire departments in the country still aren't getting adequate training when it comes to dealing with these events. So again, whether it's Firehouse training or other entities out there, please do what you can to learn as much as possible, because this technology is not going away. Justin, anything you want to say as we finish up here tonight?
No, you make a great point, Adam. This stuff isn't going to go away, and we have to keep on top of it. And doing our due diligence, doing courses like this, and training and keep on top of that, right? And keep looking towards the future for this stuff, because it's not going to go anywhere. Things might get better, but things could get worse. So I guess really time's only going to tell with that.
No, definitely. Pete Sells, I don't think I see your video on. Anything you want to say before we finish up here, just on behalf of the Alliance?
I just want to thank you for the initiative and everybody for spending their time on this. It's you got a lot of choices on where you can get your resources, and this is a really good initiative to share best practices. Thanks for letting us be involved.
Yeah, no, again, I mean, when Tom and I met up and formed this alliance along with some of the other members here, we certainly can't present training, equipment, and all this as just one entity. So by teaming up and being able to help each other out with resources and the sharing of this content is huge. And then many individuals that joined us here tonight, we have firefighters from all over Canada, the U.S., even as far as Dubai and Europe. So again, thank you to all of you for coming. Tom, as we finish up here, anything that you want to mention here before our next event in Mississauga in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I guess number one is we record these events, so there would be, as of tomorrow, the next day, 3 of these recordings of these actual webinars that will be posted on the Fire Mitigation Alliance website. You see the recordings tab there. Also, I think what's also amazing is we're really helping out a lot of volunteer fire departments, and we're also seeing a lot of interest from the First Nations, the Indigenous community across Ontario right now, but I'm also reaching out to northern Winnipeg, northern Manitoba. I think there's a lot of things we can do. I'm specifically helping groups get ready for the coming wildfire season is my mandate. But anyways, there's a lot of things we can share in this ecosystem. There's so many great players that can help city fires, rural fires, or very rural fires. So kudos to everybody that's been involved, and let's keep it rolling.
No, it's good. Again, so again, I know Mike, you jumped on here a little bit, like Michael Haringa here from CN Rail. Again, others that are going to be joining us, Anthony here from Emergency Decon Solutions. I hope you're going to be flying in for our Ontario Hazmat Responders Conference in a couple months. Lots of good opportunities here for everybody. So again, looking forward to seeing many different first responders, and industry professionals at our next event. So we always have lots of different ideas here with our Alliance group, but if there's anything that you want further training on or information, I think the next topic, talking to Justin and Tom this weekend, we'll look at more of an emergency management, incident command, and maximizing the EOC, your Emergency Operations Center. So again, maybe we can get a few others involved that have experience with dealing with those larger scale events and put something like that in our content together, because it's very, very important. And from my perspective, from a boots on the ground firefighter, I do see some gaps in there that I think we can discuss and hopefully figure out.
Yeah, and I think the other one that we want to do before the wildfire season kicks in is early detection on wildfire.
Okay.
And early attack is another one. So those are the 2 topics that are going to cover the incident command and the early attack phase.
I like it. No, lots of good stuff coming down the pipe in 2025. Again, everybody, thank you so much. If there's anything that you're looking for, whether it's training or equipment with anyone that you saw here tonight, even with Anthony and Emergency Decon Solutions or others, please reach out to us, and we'll put you in touch with anybody that you saw here tonight. So thank you so much, everybody. Keep safe, and hopefully we'll see you in Mississauga in a couple weeks. Email me to get your seat, please. info@firehousetraining.ca, and we'll add your name to the list. And we'll see you in Mississauga. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Adam.
Hey, guys. Bye-bye.
Good night.